Welcome to the Delivering Sustainable Biotech panel. My name is Hollie. I'm a director at Optimum. We're a specialist healthcare communications firm working with a number of exciting companies in the space, helping them communicate a compelling growth story to the investment community. The number of applications where biotechnology could make a difference towards sustainability is vast. Today, I'll be asking our panel of investors and companies for their perspectives on bioindustrials. I'll let the panel introduce themselves. Shall we start with Tilmann at Micropep?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Hollie. So I'm very pleased to sit on this panel with you. So my name is Tilmann. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Micropep Technologies. So Micropep is an agricultural biotechnology company based in France. And what we do is that we develop cutting-edge biological solutions to protect crops, but by spraying biology instead of spraying chemistry. And what is really unique about our approach is that we are working on a very novel category of natural molecules called micropeptides. And so very briefly, micropeptides are natural peptides that precisely target and fine-tune the expression level of key plant genes. So if you wish, it's a disruptive way to get at plant traits, but without modifying DNA. So looking at the company trajectory, I co-founded Micropep in 2016 with the two scientists at the origin of the technology, Jean-Philippe and Dominique. We raised a 4 million euros seed round in 2018 with Sofinova Partners as the lead investor. And really the focus of the seed round at that time was really to build our discovery platform for micropeptides. And today this platform blends computational biology on one side to really discover new targets and design peptides to address and target these pathways. We then have bioactivity assays, so plant phenotyping, molecular biology, peptide stability and delivery optimization to really improve the efficacy of these compounds. And finally, the third pillar of our discovery platform is by leveraging biotechnologies to produce or manufacture these peptides. And so having successfully done that over the last few years, we recently closed our Series A this year, so 8.5 million euros, led by Supernova Invest, another deep tech investor, with FMC Venture as strategic investors, and of course, with the support of our historical investors. And now this new round of funding is really about leveraging the incredible potential of micropeptides to develop our first biofungicides and bioherbicide products. So really happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Josko, would you like to go next?
Sure, with pleasure. Thanks for the invitation and the opportunity to talk to you and get people to know what we do at Sofinova Partners. So my name is Josko Bobanovic. I am a partner at Sofinova Partners Industrial Biotech Practice. Sofinova Partners is one of the oldest venture groups in Europe, started almost 50 years ago. And 11 years ago, we started looking at a new aspect, which is applying biotechnology to sustainable solutions in food, ag, chemicals, and materials markets. And the idea was really to leverage the maturity of those technologies and find new ways of applying biotech to these huge markets that are suffering from a lot of difficulties these days in terms of sustainability. So when we started doing that, we were definitely one of the pioneers in the space that today is clearly gathering a lot of interest, and therefore we're very happy about our choice and hopefully our little role in pushing others to join us in this interesting journey. Myself, I'm a physicist who previously worked in climate modeling and climate research, which gives me a little bit of understanding how sustainability works or doesn't. And then slowly ventured towards entrepreneurial things, working as a venture capitalist in Canada. And then, as I said, joining Sofinova in 2010 to help build industrial biotech practice.
Andreas?
Yes, thank you very much, Hollie. So I'm very happy to discuss with you today on this panel, very interesting panel. So I'm head of business opportunities and new business development with the company AMSilk. AMSilk is an industrial biotech company with a strong focus on structural proteins. So our vision is to improve the consumers' lives by bringing the best sustainable biomaterials to everyone. So with this mission, the company was founded in 2008 by the inventors of spider silk proteins, and is still headquartered in Munich. Right now, we are around 50 employees, so in the scale-up phase. And we have first-class investors at the moment to really bring the company to the scale-up phase and then to the next phase. Our technology can be brought to many industries and can make the difference in many industries. So our current main focus is the textile industry. So we are producing fibers out of the spider silk proteins. So right, you will all know spider webs, so it's quite the same. So here we are working with different companies like Adidas for producing performance shoes, or with Airbus, bringing the technology to composites, which is very interesting. The second big market at the moment is medical devices. So the spider silk proteins can be used as a coating, so as a liquid to coat, for example, breast implants. We're at the moment working with the company Polytech to market breast implants. And the third big thing is cosmetics, where we licensed out the cosmetic business to the world-leading company Givaudan. So and my job now is to find new business fields and to bring spider silk and structural proteins to different markets.
Thomas?
Thank you for the invitation, Hollie. Happy to be here with the panel. I am Thomas. I'm with Novo Holdings, located in Copenhagen, Denmark. Novo Holdings is the asset manager and investment arm of a big foundation called the Novo Nordisk Foundation, sort of in size and scope like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We have a legacy in industrial biotech through ownership of Novozymes and Novo Nordisk. So it's a house that's been familiar with the power of industrial biotech for 60 years. And Novo Holding has been doing venture investments in life science area for a bit more than 20 years. I would say about 5 years ago, it was decided that there are so many opportunities in industrial biotech, so why not form a dedicated unit that could invest into industrial biotech with its own competences? And that's when I got hired to the company. And we have over time built up a portfolio of companies in the space, investing and collaborating with some of the audience here as well. So very exciting times. About myself, I have been in industrial biotech most of my career, I would say, and I have a background as a biochemical engineer and done my time at the business school as well. Thanks.
Thank you. And Benjamina?
Hi, so I'm Benjamina. I'm the founder and CEO of Higher Stakes. We're addressing some of the biggest environmental and human health challenges by making meat using cell culture technologies. So the way it works is that we take a small sample of cell from the animal, which we expand and then turn into muscle, fat, and all the different types of tissue that you need to recreate meat. This meat is a lot more environmentally friendly, but also doesn't use any antibiotics, so doesn't lead to antibiotic resistance. We're focused on pork as the first product, so you can see the pork belly behind me, but also working on bacon. We've raised to date 4.2 million with lead investors, Apollo Projects, which is deep tech investor, and Lower Carbon Capital, who are carbon investors. We're now as well raising an oversubscribed Series A, based out of Cambridge in the UK, with over 9 PhDs in the team. We have proprietary technologies that allow us essentially to both grow and differentiate ourselves much more efficiently than our competitors, and we filed over 3 patents already to date on that.
Thank you. Maybe I'll start with a question for you then, Benjamina. So what was your motivation to pursue this area, and why pork specifically?
Yeah, so for me, it was really around people's health, and I see it in the broader sense of things. So obviously, animal welfare is a big part of what we are doing, but for me, it was really about people. So antibiotic resistance, which is also one of the reasons we chose pork, because of the huge amount of use of antibiotics. There's as many medically important antibiotics used on pigs in the US than on humans, which is crazy. So it's really addressing that, but also the environment, which if we mess up is directly going to affect our health through issues such as respiratory diseases. So for me, seeing a solution that can address all of those at once really was why I started the business. And also my love for food.
And Thomas, how about with Micropep? What was your motivation behind pursuing
Yes,
this?
so for me, it's a bit surprising that I ended up in agriculture, because I don't have, let's say, an agricultural or economical background. I grew up in the city in France, so I don't have farmers in our family. But I think what really led me into this position is the combination of entrepreneurship, science, and for impact. And really, for me, it's really about impact. So I'm the happy father of two daughters, so Jeanne and Suzanne. And like many parents, I'm kind of worried about the future they're going to live in. They're going to be in their 30s in 2050, and it's a bit scary. And so we all know we are just, passing on this planet. And while we cannot decide when we're going to leave, we can at least decide what we can do with the time we have here. And for me, I could have had, I think, a lucrative career in strategy consulting or join a private equity firm and do this type of jobs. But I took a different path. So I first went for entrepreneurship, really looking for a purpose in my professional career. And I think I found it by working with biologists and scientists and trying to bring my strategic and leadership skills to help really take these very exciting discoveries, but trying to turn them into efficient and real products for a more sustainable world. And so it turned out I came across the unique technology developed by Jean-Philippe and Dominique. So it's also a people story behind every company. So I met these guys, this great technology, and so we teamed up to really start building that. And I'm really happy and motivated by the impact we can have with Micropep.
Yeah. And Andreas, what excited you about AMSilk?
Yes, so I'm not the founder of AMSilk, of course, but I can tell you why I joined AMSilk. And one of the founders, Lynn Römer, is still our CTO, so the culture of the company and the spirit is still very close to the beginning. So I think we have three core values. So the one is we have this value that we believe in smarter by nature. So that means all the sustainability issues which occur, we think nature has the best answer. And the second thing is always to be successful. So you need a real game-changing technology. And we believe in structural proteins to be game-changing in really many industries. So really to have advantages also for the consumer. And the third one is always how to make impact. So I think Thomas already talked about impact, but we strongly believe in the open innovation approach. So the third core value is collaboration. So this is very important for our company. And we think with these three core values, we really can make impact. And that's why AMSilk was founded.
Yeah, wonderful. And so maybe a question for the investors. You were traditionally investing in therapeutic areas. What were the drivers that made you look to bioindustrials and other alternative technologies? And what makes them investable? Should we start with Josko? You're on mute, I think, Josko.
Sorry about that. So at Sofinnova, we've been investing in healthcare biotech for now about 35, if not 40 years. And that made us aware of how rapidly a lot of these technologies have matured. So just an example, some of you might remember, if you're young enough, when Bill Clinton announced the first sequencing of the human genome at $1 billion cost at that time. This was only 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. Okay. Today, you can get your genome sequenced for a few $100s. So the orders of magnitude of lowering that cost just on the sequencing are incredible. while one of our companies is doing the other side of the equation, which is synthesizing DNA also better, faster, cheaper than anybody else before. So the constellation of these technologies becoming accessible to everything made us aware that we could now start applying them to other sectors. And this is where we kind of started. As with anything, and this is how we work with our startups, you have to test, iterate, improve, and then do it again over. So we started with a relatively modest activity with a small fund that was focused on seed investments, and that fund has done extremely well. So as a result of, on the backdrop of those results, we raised another fund in 2017 that then we followed with a most recently announced fund a couple of weeks ago this year. So this has been an evolution for us, but clearly a decision based on many years of experience and understanding how all of a sudden we can use these technologies in the new field. The second part of your question is how does it make them investable? Okay. So the investability, if that's a word even, comes from the question whether there's someone that wants to buy. Because nominally, if nobody wants to buy, it's a hobby. It's a beautiful hobby, but ultimately there has to be a buyer. And that buyer, first of all, needs to be a customer. Okay. So we look at companies that can develop something that customers want to buy. These customers are sometimes business customers or end users, so B2B or B2C companies. But every time we see a market opportunity, that in itself, I won't say guarantees, but suggests that eventually this business might be successful, and therefore there's going to be an exit for that business. Otherwise, you are developing technology for the sake of technology, but you're not really driving something that has a commercial outcome. So this commercial angle is extremely important. This is also where you get into quite a bit of difference between healthcare investments and industrial biotech investments. Healthcare investments, typically for a venture fund, even late-stage venture fund, never see the market. They companies are exited at end of phase 2, sometimes even sooner, or at the end of their clinical development, but they never get into commercialization. In our case, we have to see these companies from the discovery all the way to their commercial phase. So the process that you have to go through and the skill set, both on the investment side and on the teams that we back, are very different. Okay, and that makes it challenging, but at the same time very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know whether to go on to my next question, but Thomas, do you want to add to?
Yeah, all very good points from Josko. I would just add a couple of extra things because I think he actually exhausted pretty much the area. But I would say from a Novo Holdings perspective, I think it's also important to say that companies that have been working within the space, mature companies, they have actually been performing very well. They have been able to create the substantial business. They have been able to create IP protection and portfolio that enable them to perform well in the market, and actually perform at the level of what you see also big pharma companies. So sort of the fundamentals of the area is good. So we sort of can see a business out there that makes sense, and then we were in-house we're working on, how can you actually get there? Because we could see the demand in the market, the need for sustainability, and then it's sort of a lot of things sort of driving towards, how do you have or how do you sort of enable that change? And you do that through venture investments, and that's sort of how our inroad into the area.
Quite a broad question, but we talked about kind of scalability. What are the other challenges that you come across when it comes to the technology? Adoption, who wants to go first?
Happy to go. I mean, we have, obviously, regulatory is a big one because it's something new. And I think, when you've all spoken about biotech, I think, yes, there's a regulatory challenge, but at least it's very known. You know exactly what are the standards that are needed, exactly, what to go through. Whereas in our sector, there are still a lot of questions. Do we go to the standards of food? Do we go to the standards of biotech? probably a mixture of both. Where do we apply which one? And again, even labeling, all of those are still big question marks. It's getting better, and these are things that we're addressing by working together with other companies. So this is something that we're addressing really as a sector. But that is definitely one of the big challenges that we're facing.
Maybe following up on that front, I think if we look at agriculture, so the positive thing is really the driver. I think there are very strong drivers for new solutions. Chemistry is being phased out by regulatory bodies in different countries, and also a huge problem with resistance weeds, resistant fungi, resistant insects to conventional chemistry. But at the same time, agriculture is a different market than pharma. At the end of the day, the farmers are spending a very narrow budget on their inputs. So for a startup company to really change the game in that space, it's about getting a good level of efficacy of your products, but also being able to sell that at a competitive cost for the farmers. And so we are working on peptides, and peptides are already sold in cosmetic, in pharma, in different industries. And one of the areas where we're focusing also efforts is really about production of peptides, because it costs about, I think, 100 euros per gram is through chemical synthesis to manufacture peptides. A farmer is spending maybe 30 euros per hectare on fungicide for wheat. So if you want to get a product where we can put a few grams, which is really small, you really need also to work on cost of production. So for us, this is not the only one, but it's one aspect also of seeing in terms of technological development that is really important. So everything around biomanufacturing, bioproduction, and innovation in that space are really important to us. And that's why also we have good collaboration in that area.
So maybe one other aspect which is interesting is that at some point, as investors, we sometimes hope that it happens later rather than sooner, some of these companies actually have to start producing something. And oftentimes we advise them to try to use other people's equipment, contract manufacturing, and so on, but that works until a certain point. So at some point in time, there needs to be a significant investment in CapEx. And this is something that VCs don't normally do, because investing in steel takes time to actually execute a project, okay? And then it takes time for it to start generating cash. But we have learned to, first of all, work with our companies to develop appropriate capital structures that can support investments in CapEx. And secondly, through hard learning, developed an appreciation of how to run these processes to avoid certain risks, mistakes, and so on, and see them through to their completion, and then eventually starting to generate revenues. Because once you cross that desert, which can be fairly long crossing, you are at the situation where not only has your technology been proven at an industrial scale, but you're generating revenues and margins, which becomes extremely interesting from a market point of view. So then these companies have in front of themselves all sorts of different options. They can grow organically, they can be acquired, they can IPO, and so on. And that's what makes it attractive. So this is a challenge, but there are ways around that.
Yeah, and I think when the venture system develops, then you would also see adjacent technologies and companies grow around. As Josko and Tilmann mentioned, we've seen more and more facilities that can do sort of medium and also pretty large scale fermentation. That is a help. We also see people who can do strain development, fee for service structures that can make the companies more lean, more focused, and get going. But I think the successful people in the area, they will always, at least in the space, they need to master cost of production, because it is an important point. We are selling products by the kilogram, and it's not like in the pharma space where we are selling efficacy to the same extent. So it's just the name of the game. And so if one is not comfortable with that sort of business, then it's not the right business for that person or that company or investment house. So we're all learning along the way here.
Yeah.
Yes, so and I think it's really a challenge and very important also for the companies to have the right investors at the right time, because normally you're growing over time. So you start with lab scale, then you do piloting, then you do scale up, and then you are hopefully doing your IPO and be a corporate. And you really need the right investors at the right time. So at the moment, we are very lucky to have Novo Holding and Cargill especially, which are very experienced and exactly what Josko and Thomas said. So starting the production, scaling up, talking about margins and distribution and things like that. So I think this is really also a challenge to always find the right investors.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. What do you believe are the pros and cons of being in Europe, UK to develop industrial biotech projects rather versus other geographies like the US, Latin America, or Asia?
Yes, I think one major advantage is we already heard that in Europe the infrastructure is quite good. So there are companies doing contract manufacturing from really, also development state, so lab scale or pilot scale and the cubic meter scale. But there are also many contract manufacturers very experienced really to raise your your scale from pilot scale to real, I don't know, 200, 300 cubic meters bioreactors. So this is very beneficial in Europe.
There's a very long tradition for doing industrial biotech in different ways. So I think when it comes to sort of key competences, Europe has really a lot to offer on manufacturing, research and development, also business development. Where we lack in Europe in general is on the entrepreneurs who sort of used to driving smaller companies from early stage to large scale or IPO, that we don't have it to the same extent, and we don't have the same capital market to support us. And the last thing I would like to mention is also when we talk sort of food and agri area, we are disadvantaged by a rather slow regulation to sort of get our products to the market. It would be nice if we had a more sort of proactive approach to embrace technology and get to the market. I'm not asking for people to be sloppy on the regulatory path, because nobody has an interest in that. But what we would like to see is at least people embrace the things and they assess the pros and cons fast, and they are not sort of afraid of GMO or similar technologies. Sort of my highlights.
Yeah, definitely agreeing with you, Thomas. I think back on the pros, I think Europe is a good place to start a company. I think there are good support for entrepreneurs when they are starting their project. Even in France, I think we have good talent, good workforce. I think it's cheaper than in some places than in the US. I think it's a good place to start. And also you mentioned manufacturing capabilities. So I think these key operational things I think it's good to have them in Europe. I think where we lack help is really on the regulatory side, as you say. So time to market for me is going to be definitely a longer process in Europe. That's the way it is. We are going to follow the process, of course. But I know that because time to market is important in terms of, Josko mentioned that, but exit and company strategy. So we decided with Micropep to accelerate also presence in the US, because I'm convinced that almost unfortunately, our first product are going to be sold first in the US or Latin American markets before being approved in Europe. And so we need to be smart in the way we move projects. So leveraging the strengths of Europe, but also not being penalized by that. And also because that's in agriculture, it's a global, it's a competition between startups. You have very good Israeli startups, Asian startups, US startups. And for a French company, we need to be playing with the same tools and the same opportunities. So yeah, good things in Europe, but also we need to have a global mindset and very rapidly expand to the geographies where the markets are more proactive, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think in our sector, it's slightly different. For example, in Europe and the UK, the regulation is actually better defined than in the US. But for example, if you compare it to Singapore, Singapore is much faster and more lenient. So I think it also depends the specific industry and the specific technology. If we were to work with genetically engineered cells, then that would be a lot more difficult. Whereas us working with non-genetically engineered cells, it makes the process nearly more defined here than in the US. I think the point, Thomas, you made around entrepreneurs, I think is valid as well for talent. I think we have exceptional talent in terms of academic capacity and the level of intellectual capacity in a way, but I think what we see is the talent lacks the kind of entrepreneurial mindset, and having, you know, people that have scaled, been in companies when there were, you know, 10, 20 people and brought them to 400, 500 plus people, and really gone through that journey of scale in biotech. There's a lot less of that, I think, in Europe, and partly because there's less companies, but we find that not, you know, because there's one thing, you know, us as founders, but we want the whole company to be really in that mindset. And I think that's something that Europe, we can work on.
I just want to pick up on one thing that Thomas mentioned, which is the capital markets, right? As I said before, these projects occasionally and quite often actually do need significant amount of capital. And I think that in Europe, we're kind of in a catch-22 situation where the society and the institutions, to a large extent, have recognized the importance of sustainability and are looking how to support those sectors. At the same time, I don't think there is a clear understanding that innovation is the only way through to these solutions. And therefore, it's paradoxical that there isn't enough capital in early and growth stages for the companies that are in Europe that do need to grow, that do need capital, while we have all, as a society, made that realization that this is a sector to support. And so asset managers, and Novo is here an exception in this sense, have significant amount of money and are nominally supporting these sectors, yet we don't see an efficient flow of capital for these technologies to develop, grow, and see the light of day eventually, because they're the ones that are going to change the world. We're not going to do that by making incremental improvements on things that we are doing today.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter as well of risk, and also what background those people have. So if we look at the US, a lot of the VCs, the background is people have been a lot more through the journey themselves, so they might be more willing to take risks. Whereas, as you say, a lot of people here as well, coming from sometimes a more financial background, are less willing to take the risk because they don't necessarily understand the risk as well as, the both of you do.
Where are the big success stories that investors can look to, as an example of, successful companies that they can look to as a case study to see that, it can be done? Are there any?
So there are quite a few success stories in the space, and they span in some ways a decade. And the question is, how is success defined, right? So in the eyes of some people, success is when the company goes public. Sometimes that's true, and it represents a liquidity event. Sometimes that's a step up to getting access to larger financing. And we just had in our portfolio two very successful IPOs, one with Biotalis in Belgium and the other one with Afiren in France, that are both companies that are definitely a demonstration of success through their IPOs, but at the same time, this is a way for them to access capital, addressing the point that I made earlier. So it's a two-way street. across the ocean, we've seen some significantly larger stories that are still on track to be success. For example, this pack of Ginkgo Bioworks, or IPO of Zymergen, or SPACs that were done by Origin Materials, Pure Cycle, and similar companies that are playing in this broader space. Again, for some of them, this was a way to access significant amounts of capital to build a $300 million plant. For the others, it was more of a liquidity event. So these are all stories that help entrepreneurs understand how to play either in public or private markets, because we've seen some mega rounds in private markets as well, with some companies raising north of 300 million in the past year, which are also definitely going to be successful as they deploy that capital.
So maybe another success story to mention is LanzaTech in the US. It's a New Zealand American company. They are in essence, it's a biological scrubbing system where you convert off gases into chemicals. And I think the success story here is that they actually have built more than one large-scale plant, so demonstrating that the economics of a large-scale plant works, and customers are interested on building new plants, sort of getting here. And I think that there are actually quite a few companies as we speak who are in that scale up phase and will complete and get their business right pretty soon. So I think there's a lot of success stories on the way, but exactly how you define it, that's hard to say. In drug discovery space, there's a long history of sort of exits and M&A activities. We simply don't have that to the same extent.
Yet.
Yeah.
Good point,
Yeah.
Josko.
So where do you think we'll be in 5 years? There seems to be much more demand for companies to be looking at sustainable solutions, and much more demand from consumers. Do you think it will take much longer to see this much needed shift?
So I think I think the demand from the consumer is actually growing and pretty consistent. I think what we need to see is some of the bigger companies being able to acquire or collaborate with the smaller companies and get their products to the market. I think that's what we need to see to a larger extent. And I know Sofinnova has a lot of history here on that sense, but we would like to see a transition of larger companies in the sector, sort of embracing the technology instead of not collaborating because it's not invented in-house. So I think a shift from larger companies to sort of enable collaboration is important. And we see that actually right now with portfolio companies. They are doing more deals with corporates, and I think that's also a positive step forward.
But the consumer point is an extremely important one, in a sense that all of us are consumers, and we vote with our wallet. And the companies that are serving us in that sense will have to obey our vote. So we are the ones, and not just us, but everybody else around the world, voting with their wallet and driving certain innovation. And this is making a significant impact in some sectors. We see a much more open mind in food companies that realize that they cannot invent everything by themselves. They need to collaborate. They need to be open. They need to actually practice open innovation, which is a buzzword that has been around for many years in many sectors, but has not been really materially practiced. And that's, in my view, going to make a big difference, because if your consumer is asking you for a clean label product and you don't have one, well, you don't have the luxury of taking 5 years to develop that. You need to turn around, look who has it, and start working with them, which will initially drive partnering, joint ventures, and so on, but eventually, hopefully, drive some M&A activity, and hopefully also restructuring of the sector, in a sense that today, most of the time, startup needs to cover everything from discovery all the way to ability to produce commercially at scale. That's a tall order. when you look at the pharmaceutical sector, you have specialized service organizations that help you in preclinical, in regulatory, in phase 1, phase 2, CMOs, and so on. That whole, not even cottage industry anymore, it's an industry in itself, will have to develop around this space to help startups not to reinvent things every time they start doing something, but rather focus on the specific differentiating factors that they have and serve themselves with the value chain that exists already around them.
And I think, you've spoken about joint ventures, acquisitions, but I think even more simple models. So for example, in Switzerland, 3 large, companies have decided to create a pilot plan for cultivated meat companies to go through, and scale their products. And I think having things like that, where actually we're not forced to, we can create our own brand, we can create our own, our own distribution and make a brand that's going to be lasting, but still leverage some of the known, the things that are known to the sector and leverage those big companies. So I think it's also innovating on how we collaborate with those companies, particularly as models become more complex, because it's not just, oh, well, it's very simple, we can, we've done everything and we can just sell to Tyson and they know it and have done it a million times before. Because the problem is, well, we actually need that little part from that one and that little part from that one and that little part from that one, and bringing it all together, where maybe an acquisition might make less sense because that one partner can't do everything. So how do we get everyone together, together to push the whole sector forward?
Yeah, I would say if we look at the ag space, I think also things are moving in the right direction, if we can say that. There has been some successful acquisition back in 2012, 2013, but then there was a big pause in that space, and I think the major really focused on the mergers and all of that. But over the last few months, even, I think, we see a new dynamic. There was some good acquisition, Bollag, for instance, by Syngenta. And these big companies, they were really not well equipped to deal with biology. So it was really chemistry, so chemical companies. And now they're putting more and more emphasis on, okay, understanding how biology works, how can we use these biological solutions? And we start to see more and more collaboration, open innovation, as we said, initiatives. And yeah, I'm confident that in the next 5 years, hopefully the landscape is going to change in that front with them.
Yes, so I'm pretty optimistic for some reasons. So the first one is, of course, what was already mentioned. The consumer behavior and the consumer demand is clearly going to have true environmental integrity. So this causes the second part. So the big players really launched their sustainability strategies, which look very good. So I think biotechnology and industrial biotechnology in particular can support these sustainability strategies. And the third one is even the politics react right now. So the upcoming microplastic regulation, for example, will force many industries to simply change, because several ingredients will be banned. So they really need new solutions and innovations to be able to compete on the market. So these are the 3 pillars, I would say, which cause my optimism.
Wonderful. Does anybody have anything else to add? So we'll be finishing shortly.
Not just saying maybe that, yeah, I'm optimistic that things are going to progress in the right direction in the next 5 years. That was your question. I'm just wondering, is it fast enough? And really, it's all about that, because I think our planet is burning, and so there's kind of an urgency that I feel like, okay, we need really to accelerate on these topics. There are multiple reasons why it's tough to develop this kind of technology. So we mentioned capital, we mentioned capex equipments, and so yeah, we need everybody to jump in and help, okay, fast forwarding these technologies and solutions. because the planet needs it, really.
Great.
Fab. Well, thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you for watching. If you have any questions for the panelists, please feel free to reach out through the Genesis app. Thanks again. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.